The students should be prepared to understand that the planet is the only place that we have to live. Unless we have a free trip to Mars, that is not going to happen. So, how best we can utilize the opportunity to understand and articulate our thinking and design in our design programs to make this place safe to live. So I think climate change is one of the most important aspect of this school. What we have done is that we are stressing on our studio projects on try to adopt as much as possible the sustainable development goals by the United Nations, and we want to drive this right at the young age, right from the first year onwards. So we want to make this school uniquely positioned in terms of its sustainable approach to architectural design, and that's where the school would make a big difference. So architecture is not just about design of buildings, but it's about how the buildings sit within a context and how they interact with this immediate environment. The present school, my approach is going to be basically trying to articulate it as a practice-based education. Apart from the fact that I would like to see this school as a trailblazer in coming years, trying to take that leadership role in educating architecture and reinventing the very idea of what architecture is and how relevant it is to the 21st century. So the millennials have a different idea of life. I think post-pandemic it has re-articulated itself, and I think we have to really think of a school which can adapt itself to the kind of situations that might crop up in the future. So the students, the students should be prepared to understand that the planet is the only place that we have to live. Unless we have a free trip to Mars, that is not going to happen. So how best we can utilize the opportunity to understand and articulate our thinking and design in our design programs to make this place safe to live. So I think climate change is one of the most important aspect of this school. What we have done is that we are stressing on our studio projects on try to adopt as much as possible the sustainable development goals by the United Nations, and we want to drive this right at the young age, right from the first year onwards. So we want to make this school uniquely positioned in terms of its sustainable approach to architectural design, and that's where the school would make a big difference. So architecture is not just about design of buildings, but it's about how the buildings sit within a context and how they interact with this immediate environment. So a building which has the lowest carbon footprint will be most appreciated. So our programs need to be articulated, and I, as the leader of the school, leader of the academic team, am trying to push this idea, or try to make the projects and the design programs to look into the kind of threats that is happening to our planet, especially if you take at the kind of temperature rise that is going to happen in few decades, and that is going to be a disaster for a subtropical nation like India. And how as architects, we have greater responsibility. So we want to drive that idea of responsibility, not just being responsible, but responsible design and construction to produce something that will have least impact to environment. That is what we want to drive through SEED, School of Environment, Architecture and Design at SRM Ramapuram campus. Yeah, that's a good question actually. So you see, I always believe that architecture is very different from other engineering programs as far as India is concerned, but it's very different abroad. Many of the engineering programs are practice based abroad, but architecture is purely a practice based education. So it's a skill that is very uniquely learned. It's like I always used to tell that you can't teach surgery unless you've done a proper surgery by a surgeon. So you can't teach architecture if you have not built anything. So if you've just been publishing papers, then you call it paper architect or paper academician. But if you have really built something to showcase and to be criticized by somebody else or published, that is where you are real architect. And an architect, the idea of an architect is to build something. So I come from industry, I come from my profession, so my academics is comparatively, academic experience is comparatively lesser, even though I was teaching part-time right from day one. But I feel that practice linked to architectural education is so important. We do have internship in the architecture course, either it's one semester or some schools make it 1 year. That's a good thing, but it goes off so fast. So the students at the end of the day, when they come out of the school, they actually become, they have a problem of placement, because even if they get placed, they don't have those kind of the contemporary knowledge that is required for practice. So we don't really try to make them practice ready or industry ready. I'm not really telling in terms of making it industry ready, so to supply manpower for any particular firm or organization or whatever. I'm talking about how a person himself can be ready to do something when he comes out of the school. So that is where practice based education comes into play, and we otherwise call it as OBL, which is called outcome based education. Architecture is nothing but outcome based education right from day one. So whatever you do in your studio is actually you're producing something to showcase it to somebody, to make somebody to criticize, to make people talk about it. So that means whatever ideas are not just written on paper, it's actually produced there. So right from day one, the course is outcome based, but unfortunately what happens is that as we progress higher classes, that kind of practice infusion into teaching gets lesser and lesser, which is very unfortunate. So what I want to do is to bring in practitioners to embed themselves into the whole education process. So it may not be so easy to do. We have now UGC has come out with a rule that we should have practitioners from industry to come into education. They don't need to have a PhD. If they have a master's degree is more than sufficient. I think our Council of Architecture has a brilliant program, brilliant regulations which encourages practice, and our council says that 25% of the visiting faculty should be from practice, which is very good. Some schools keep 50%. When I started a school in 2011, I had nearly about 40% as a visiting faculty. A prominent school like CEPT must be having nearly 50% from the practicing side, and that's how that it makes that school one of the best schools in India. So practice before you preach is my policy. and that makes the students more understanding, and they more realistic and more pragmatic in their approach to design. And as we go further through SEED, we want to bring in those practices to be part of the entire studio processes, and also have some sort of expert lectures from industry to give on some theory subjects. But I think the studio forms the major part of the architecture education. Like for example, it's the heart of the school. I always used to say that it's the heart of the school. So that heart has to function healthy. So if that heart, the studio has to function healthy, then you have to bring that practice into education. So that's how it's important for me. I know the reality of practice because I come from practice, and it's important all the schools in the country engage practitioners. They're all doing that, but I think we need to bring in a little more structure to it, and not just go by the rules book, but go outside the rules book and bring those people into your fold, into your school, and explore a lot of new things into your studio projects, and that makes it really a healthy program. Yes, someone who wants to step in from practice into academic environment, and someone from academic environment wants to step in into practice. It's both ways. So the practitioners should have a link with academic environment, which means they should try to attach or link themselves to schools where they can try to explore or try to expose their ideas to the students. And in the same way, the teachers who are teaching at the school, I think it's important for them to practice. The Council of Architecture stresses that every teacher should be registered with the Council of Architecture, and they should practice. They should have their own practice. But if they don't have their own practice, they should associate with the practice. You understand? So you might not be working full time there, but you could be there in one of the projects. Okay, that project carries your name. So you bring that project back to school, and then what happens is that you put it up in front of the students to have a look at the work that you've been doing. Now, when a student knows that you are a practicing architect, you actually built something, you've done something, then the student is going to have develop more respect towards you. So it's both ways. So practice going into academics and academics going into practice. That's the kind of a nurture that needs to happen, just like in medicine. Okay, a practicing surgeon teaches surgery in a medical school. A practicing cardiologist teaches cardiology in the school. So that is how an architecture school should be. It's very different from engineering. Never mix up architecture with engineering. Engineering is a different field altogether, but architecture needs a very special care. We need engineering, but we need to know where to bring in engineering, how to articulate it, how to bring it into embed it into your program. Now, as you know, technologies are going high, in the sense that we are today talking about artificial intelligence, we're talking about virtual reality, augmented reality, we're talking about metaverse and blockchain and all those things which is happening now. We see in news that big architectural firms are already into this kind of digital real estate development and something like that. Who knows, some days I might probably own a property in Alps or something like that, provided if I had the money to buy it. So things are developing that way. So there's a big opportunity for architecture students to look into gaming, look into digital technologies, look into AR, VR, talking about autonomous engineering applications. So the whole lot of things, and we have a whole lot of technological backup that is required, like for example, utilization of 3D printing, large format 3D printing, which can actually develop the technology to print homes or building components or whatever it is. Then of course we have these technologies have already developed quite well in the West, and we are trying to do here because we have a great housing demand which is still not fully fully provided with. So there's an equal amount of opportunities for both academicians as well as practitioners. So we need to bring them in, we need to collaborate with them, and that kind of collaboration will involve a lot of research. Like for example, a company like L&T or IIT Madras. So you see these people are very, they have developed a 3D printed home, concrete homes, which is very interesting. So, but both of these departments, they don't have an architectural input. So you see there is a technology there, but there is a missing of an architectural component to it. So imagine if architects join together and work with these technologies, and we can create wonders. So that is where industry, profession and academia can come together and collaborate and make wonderful things. So there's a university called Stuttgart University in Germany, which is doing a wonderful work involving industry. Their experimental lab is absolutely fantastic. They work with robotics, they work with 3D printers, large format 3D printers. They have state-of-the-art technological equipment. Whatever you want, you can actually build a prototype very easily. Whether it's going to be injection molding or whether it's going to be something like a CNC router or some sort of equipment that is required for high-tech applications. So we need to develop the schools of architecture to have an access to this kind of information, access to this kind of infrastructure. Now look at SRM, Ramapuram, here SEED. Now SRM is not just architecture, it has a wide variety of courses here. You have engineering, mechanical, electronics, computer. They have a beautiful robotic labs and all that stuff. It's time that our faculty collaborate with these engineering fields where we can come out, we can give our ideas to them to collaborate in order to create some wonderful stuff which will be high-tech in nature, which can be mass-produced, which can bring in a lot of new ideas, developing some sort of incubation at the school level. So there's a big opportunity here at SRM Ramapuram where we can develop such kind of collaboration, and the faculty have to do that kind of collaboration. They should come out with ideas, and sky is the limit. You can do whatever you want. In terms of pedagogical approach, I think basically the learning has to be structured properly, and I think there are certain our curriculum follows the Bloom's taxonomy based learning, but I would put it in four basic parts of the entire learning process. The first one is about creating a framework, creating the principles of learning. The second one is trying to execute those principles. The third one is understanding those principles, execute, understanding, or the application of it. The fourth one is all about realization, that is the reality of it and how our creations are more realistic, and that is where the practice comes into play. So whatever we do, from a single line to a shape, to a design, to architecture, to manufacture, there must be a kind of a thread that can give a learning process, and that pedagogy should be applicable in right through your education delivery, and whether it's practice process or whether it is education process, there should be a kind of a thread that needs to link each and everything, where we can go back and refer things, what is happening, and then correct our course and then go into one direction which can help us achieve the end results whatever we want.